All right, we're going to get started. Good morning, my name is Greg Smith, and I'm your host for APIs and Application Security. And this morning we're talking about securing APIs and leveraging APIs to streamline operations. So thank you for joining us, and we're going to proceed with our second track, our second session, featuring John Lettinen from GE, who is the Access Management Integration Leader at GE Digital. John's team delivers the last mile for application authentication solutions deployed within GE. He operationalizes new technologies for consumption by the thousands of internal and external apps in use across all GE businesses. This role affords him the visibility into opportunities for service improvement and automation in the enterprise access management space, while also serving as the feedback conduit for the external and internal business customers, which informs the future of identity solutions in the enterprise. John, it's all yours.
Thank you. Hearing that read out loud, that's very wordy. I'm very self-aggrandizing. So good morning, everybody. Before I begin, I am compelled to say that the views and opinions expressed in this talk are my own and do not represent anything from my employer or any of their subsidiaries. With that out of the way, and completely redundantly, I'm John Lettinen, the SSO Integrations Leader for GE Digital. I operate inside of a 125-year-old enterprise who has comparatively little identity and access management or information security experience during those 125 years. And as the Access Management Integration Leader, I solve the last mile problem for enterprise applications and APIs to consume authentication services. And the topic of this conference is intelligent identity, and we have had, and we'll no doubt continue to have lots of great conversations on this as the week goes on. But the sad reality for a lot of us enterprise practitioners is we work in spaces which are drowning in technical debt, using antiquated design patterns, and that reality of that situation prevents us from taking a lot of these discussions and lessons learned and making them immediately useful and applicable inside of these spaces in which we work. And what's more, even if you're not tied down with a lot of technical debt, if there is not the will inside of your enterprise to look forward into how identity can facilitate the business, you're not going to be able to accomplish the value add of identity. You can't prepare for intelligent identity inside of an intransigent enterprise. So 2 years ago, I gave a presentation here on how we were approaching trying to make our enterprise care about identity. And what we did was we created a new group. We christened it Integrations. This is distinct from Operations, who kept the lights on for our solutions, and Engineering, who designed new application solutions for identity. This integrations team was part solutions architect, part customer service, part professional services for the enterprise application teams. The important thing is that through this team, we created a standard and repeatable and easily accessible avenue through which the enterprise app teams and the businesses could consume our authentication services. And it worked. Within a short amount of time, we quickly reduced the cycle time for new technologies from going from proof of concept into an operationalized solution to provide value to the enterprise. We were operating at a scale that they were not accommodated to, and so we were able to move the needle significantly in that way. But even during that presentation, I recognized that having a group or a team, a whole bunch of manpower to solve the last mile problem is not the end state of a mature enterprise identity delivery system. We're functionally solving it using a mechanical Turk. But the business loves when you offer a mechanical Turk, especially something that will provide artisanal, bespoke integration solutions on an app-by-app basis to your security services. The problem is when you do that, you're always maximally utilized, because the more you do, the more the enterprise will expect that you can do. So you don't get to take the time to focus on those initiatives which will help you get your team smaller, realize cost efficiencies, and whatnot. And what's more, the enterprise becomes a little bit dependent on you too. Some anti-patterns began to pop up over the years as we ran this program, namely because we were willing to accommodate lots of fringe use cases. People began to design for and expect accommodation of fringe use cases at the authentication event. This means that we're going to be locked into a certain way of doing things and unable to move to different technologies or be able to swap parts of our platforms interchangeably, because now app teams are designing for something special at the authentication event. And what's more, as I said before, I really don't believe that we can call the last mile problem for authentication services solved until it is fully automated. So this is where smart man Pat Maloney comes in. I also worked with Sean Farrell, also smart. But they did the heavy lifting with me in figuring out what an automated solution would look like. We took a look at our service library, what we offered through my team. And we offered OAuth, OpenID Connect services, SAML, and the dinosaur in the room, proprietary agent-based web access management. That one has about 16 years of history in our organization. We'll talk on that a little bit later. So we looked at our library and said, now, what do we need in an automation product for this service? We decided that we needed a strong administrative API to let us write to these services. We wanted the transaction to be lightweight and configuration as well, not just at the identity provider, but also at the application or service provider side. And what's more, we wanted it strategically aligned with our vision for identity inside of the enterprise. We wanted standard-based protocols, standard-based ports. And next up, when designing any solution, you need to consider your customers. We have a handful of identity and access management literate customers inside of our organization. These are the orchestration folks working in cloud environments. But far and away, we got lots of program managers, lots of web and app admins who are only approaching the integrations team to get authentication services because they need to tick off something inside of a compliance checklist. So they do not necessarily understand the how or the value of these services outside of compliance. So considering who would actually use our services and what services lended themselves to automation, we set a targeted scope for what we were going to put effort into to build an automated product. We couldn't hope to do this if we decided to support it all, so to speak. And along the way, we realized that the way to do this was to use self-service as the new automation. So for the power users, this is easy. They're already operating inside of orchestration environments, already provisioned to cloud. So all we needed to do was expose an API inside of our authorization server. So now, as part of their build scripts or whatnot, they can hit our authorization server and provision a client and associate that with a container or instance inside their cloud environment. That container or instance knows which authorization server to call home for authorization and authentication decisions. And since it is all programmatic and REST-based, it scales. Now, for our checklisters, we decided to build a web form. Easy enough. We collect what we need to build the connection inside of our identity provider for SAML, entity ID, ACS URL, and whatnot. We log it so we can do a little bit of governance on it. And we post that to our identity provider. They get a confirmation that they have built the service provider inside of our identity provider. And then we instruct them to hit our identity provider metadata endpoint and carry that back to their service provider to complete the configuration. Similar pattern for the OAuth. You build your client, you get confirmation that it's there, and now you're off to go build your relying party. So we had and we built basic self-service capabilities the way we wanted. So now with those delivered, the trick then becomes how to make self-service the smarter option compared to engaging my integrations team. The business knows its business above all, and we're here as facilitators of the business. They don't necessarily understand the potential for business acceleration and value that identity can bring. They may not be ready to have that conversation. So if you're looking to change enterprise behavior, use the terms they know, namely billable services and SLAs. In late 2016, we began operating under a chargeback model for our services, which had hitherto been free. And by free, I mean transparent to them. And to our credit, we did cover our costs, so we were providing value to the business in that regard. But the most important thing was, by switching to a chargeback model, it gave us an opportunity to use something the business would understand to influence enterprise behavior. We began to charge different amounts for different technologies. OpenID Connect was cheap. SAML, inexpensive, a little bit more than OpenID Connect. But the important thing is we put a premium on the access management. So now when program managers come to us, they have 16 years of history expecting to use web access management to integrate with authentication services. But now they look and OpenID Connect is very inexpensive. Suddenly that changes the game because they look at that as a way to recoup costs inside of their program charter. So that's great. That was a big driver for OpenID Connect in our enterprise. But better than cheap is free. If we're trying to change behavior, we want to incentivize them to not use us at all. So the self-service portals themselves, 100% free. In late 2016, we had the opportunity as part of some cost out to renegotiate what our traditional SLAs for service had been. We usually operated on a pretty tight time frame in return. The businesses liked that, that was good. But in late 2016, we expanded that out. So now there's a much more significant time cost involved in engaging my team. So they were not happy, but again, this is an opportunity to drive behavior. If you're behind on your program, you know it has no SLA, no queues, no lines? Self-service. We got to drive people there to make up the time on their program charters. So these efforts and these products have been soaking in our environment for about 18 months, and let's take a look at that impact. 2 years ago, last year, in all of our environments, we had about 800 clients in OAuth, about 500 service providers, and about 7,200 applications using web access management. With 2 years of these products and this effort going on, the landscape of what is being consumed inside of our enterprise has changed significantly. We have 10,000 clients by last check, 8,500 using OpenID Connect, over 5,000 service providers. And as for the applications using web access management, don't really care anymore because it's in containment. We finally broke the back of the 16-year-old incumbent technology. And what's more, beyond containment, and I had to update my slide to put this in here, it has an expiration date now. There's a light at the end of our web access management tunnel. So the service is operationally supported to make sure we have business continuity, but there's no longer an appetite for modifying, customizing, doing anything to an application currently using web access management. Nothing new will be connected. If an application team intends to refresh their environment, there's no longer anybody there to assist them in connecting agents to a central access management server. They have to design for OpenID Connect and SAML as part of that refresh program. Additionally, we've improved the security posture of the enterprise by growing the number of the identity and access management literate folks out there. We provide a compliant identity provider and say use whatever libraries, plugins, or middleware you want to become a service provider or relying party. And if you speak OpenID Connect or SAML, you can connect. But the solutioning is yours. And of course, as a result, the more they do, the more they can do. We're seeing less and less of the program managers and the checklisters. But significantly, this self-service play represents another step in the state of abstraction. Data centers saw reduced cost and ease of implementation due to cloud hosting technologies. Virtual directories, same thing with identity stores. And API gateways are currently dropping the barrier to entry to consume microservices in a rich way. By driving self-service and automation, we've accomplished the abstraction of our own administrators. As of April this year, the only way to consume authentication services inside of our enterprise is through self-service or that API. We've liquidated my team, and now I'm an integration leader with no integrations team beneath me. But the good news is significant cost savings. These are real dollars year over year that are not going to go out the door in 2017 that we did spend in 2016. So there's a significant financial incentive to drive towards self-service. But as identity practitioners, let's consider the valuation of how we've positioned our enterprise. So now we're using exclusively standards-based identity protocols. Every new solution delivered in that space, there's no longer anybody there to handhold people to consume it. So as part of the design phase, you need to anticipate and design for it being digestible by people with minimal experience in access and identity management via self-service. As new profiles of OAuth, new capabilities are rolled out, we, with an update of our authorization server, can now embed those new capabilities inside of our very service fabric and make those things immediately useful to everybody consuming them. And as a happy side effect, by proliferating OAuth, we saw a proliferation as well of the use of APIs within our organization and all the benefits that that brings with it. So as fun as attractive as it is to move the needle forward, there is a significant amount of give you have to give your customers to make sure that they can follow you along the path to a standardized place. Namely, self-service is a product, so you have to run it like a product. That means customer touch points and engagements to gather user stories. We have a portal that describes how to consume authentication services inside of our enterprise, and we only detail the things that are uniquely interesting to our own environment. We simply refer to standards documentation for the standards we support. We run collaboration activities where we reach out and mingle and answer questions from the customer base to hear the new use cases coming up from the businesses, so we can make sure we always have a solution for them. For the last 2 years, and this has been fun, I've had open office hours, an open Q&A call at 9 a.m. every Wednesday a.m. in which anybody in the enterprise can come and ask me a question publicly, no matter how big or small, simple or complex, about authentication services. Those touch points really help drive the sense of where the value is and where you want to put your effort to improve your self-service product. And of course, and we all love this, we're all on the hook for documentation as well. So some things to really help accelerate this as you move forward is in an organization where the app teams are used to an old way to do things, there's going to be a lot of friction when you try to introduce something new. Giving them the freedom to implement something like OpenID Connect or SAML when they've historically used web access management introduces a lot of parallelization by choice. So what we found to really grease those skids was use solutions that look familiar while still bringing them over into the standards-based identity space. In particular, and to Hans Zandbelt's credit, ModAuth OpenID Connect has been fantastic for helping people get trusted header apps into our environment. Shibboleth SP has a long track record of doing something very similar. And of course, since now all of our authentication services are consumable via self-service, we're on the hook for governance. So we authenticate every user who comes to log something inside of our identity providers. We associate their entity IDs or their client IDs to their identity. And for programmatic-based manipulations, we built a wrapper which checks the authenticated user, does a lookup against a database to make sure that that authenticated user is only entitled to hit these things that that person has created. And then they're then allowed to programmatically make create, read, update, delete operations against them. Additionally, plugging in this governance to the enterprise app ownership initiatives, billing, this helps give us a sense and align with our master data management strategy as well. So as I had said, being an integration leader without an integrations team is an interesting space, but I realized that there's nothing about the things I'm describing here that are solely unique to identity. They don't need to only be thought of in that context. It took us about 3 years to go from the old environment with lots of technical debt, turning that into a pretty performant team to deliver these services, and finally collapsing it all into an automation and self-service product. With all the talk of digital transformation going on in all the enterprises and all the legacy infrastructure that needs to be retired there, why not apply this model to other technologies as well? I think this is a potential framework to help enterprises get to a position where they can accomplish digital transformation and retire technical debt. So that way, when you're at a conference themed on something like intelligent identity, the things you're talking about will be immediately useful to you and your enterprise. And I assure you, if we did this for a 125-year-old behemoth, you can do it too. Thank you.
All right, thank you, John. Excellent topic. I'm hoping my team will learn some of your lessons on the self-service. So we have time for a few questions. Please raise your hand. I'll bring a microphone to you. The sessions are being recorded, so I want you to wait till you have a mic and come back here.
So some of the comments you made were, are you federating to other identity providers from your identity provider?
So yes, that's actually on the product roadmap as a service we intend to offer the enterprise. So yes, we are. What was fun, and I learned some more recently from other businesses is, and maybe I shouldn't divulge that, but the point is because we were standards-based, they were able to solve some problems for their particular customers, unique in their business, by choosing us as an identity provider for certain contexts for their apps. So these are the enterprise-controlled identities. But then potentially doing identity provider discovery to hit a different identity provider to use that same application.
So what are they using for discovery is, I guess, the core of my question.
Actually for like an actual product or
the process that you're using? Is there like a custom application you created, or are you using all standard?
So it's all standards based. And I don't know how else to describe it outside of IDP discovery. So like when you enter an email address, a domain is searched against registered identity providers, and then based on an email domain or however you configured it, it then points you to the identity provider that correlates to that domain. And then you get your assertion and you come back into the host application.
This is just for curiosity. Why are you still supporting SAML? Why aren't you trying to phase out SAML?
So considering where we were, I was happy to get rid of the proprietary one, and that's been my focus above all. I will say that OpenID Connect has proliferated far faster than I ever would have imagined. But in a world where most SaaS providers still speak SAML, it's important to have a robust SAML offering. And SAML was the very beginning baby steps of getting enterprise app teams away from that proprietary solution. And so there's a little bit of incumbency there. But to your point, I agree. And we're banging the OpenID Connect and OAuth drums far harder than SAML at this point.
Can you describe the size and skill sets for your integration team at the various phases of your implementation, both legacy technical debt environment, creating a self-service model, and then living in the self-service model?
Ooh, that's fantastic. So when I came in, it was low-cost contractors literally doing the same thing over and over again based on certain inputs. It struck me as ripe for disruption, so to speak. I partnered with Steve Hutchinson to deliver and make sure we could offer at a wider scale SAML. And this was back in 2014, and I'm kind of amazed that that's the earliest we were able to offer it at a wide scale. But I kind of had to coach those folks to start speaking SAML. So, and to my team's credit, and to whom I'm totally indebted, that low-cost team, they were the same team who followed me through all this. They started as, here's our simple thing we do. Let's expand this, because I offered them an opportunity to learn. They just like anybody else want to learn and grow. So I said, let's do SAML together, and let's offer as part of our library. And though they had some trepidations at first, as they learned, they realized that they were now more employable, more capable. Similar story with OAuth, OpenID Connect. Every now and then, and one of the great inflators of that $3.2 million figure was we brought in some point folk to work on some special projects that were exceptionally high cost. I don't really consider them relevant to this journey, but I was responsible for their costs, therefore I'm going to count them. But yeah, so we all grew together. It was fantastic. And again, there's a reason why I'm indebted to the team that I worked with, because they were willing and eager to grow with me and figure out how to offer this. Internally, we lean on automation engineers like Pat Lunny to help proof that. We didn't have a lot of help from those vendors to build the self-service items, but my team supported me and did not undermine me at all when we were building this because of the journey we had together getting there.
So when you begin this journey to transform to OpenID Connect and OAuth, did you also take an approach of letting clients handle their authorization, or you're still doing that for the clients?
So I think there's a gap, and I think probably our next big space to remediate might be when we can have a nice standards-based way to offer fine-grained authorization under control by the application owners. We traded fine-grained auth that was proprietary and burdensome for coarse-grained auth, and we made the strategic decision that getting into a more agile place while only offering coarse-grained auth at the identity provider and pushing fine-grained to the service, the application teams, that was a reasonable trade-off to get to this point. Now that we're here, and I think things like, if Fuma 2 proves to be as cool as it sounds, of course, we're going to start leading on, well, here you go. Here's a profile which you can use now to use fine-grained authorization. Because if we continue with this coarse-grained, fine-grained model indefinitely, I think we're going to find ourselves behind some 8 balls over time.
One last question.
Question on libraries. Did you advocate for libraries to give to the applications? Along that same line, going forward, do you see yourself having to put FIDO support directly in your infrastructure so that you could have mobile FIDO clients?
So the first question, we leaned on the OpenID certified libraries for a lot of things. So the OpenID.net Foundation has application libraries for various tech stacks, and a lot of teams were able to pick those up based on their tech stacks and use them. As for Introducing FIDO libraries, I'm not at all against it. The design we have that Steve Hutchinson went over the other day in his presentation outlined that we're actually going to be building an authentication bus, which our federated solutions will be looking to at the login event, get the appropriate token. Then we can do some logic there to hit the multi-factor auth piece of that based on certain risk scores. So I'm kind of over the map there. We're not pursuing that right now, but by getting ourselves in this position to be standards-based and being able to swap pieces, we're not against it when the time comes, and if that's a smart decision.
All right, thank you everyone for joining us today. 2 more sessions in this track coming up after the break. Before you leave, I have to ask, please, if you haven't already downloaded the app, get it from your app store, and we'd really appreciate your feedback in the session survey for this session on the agenda. Thank you all for coming.